Hi, everyone. My name is Alice Havel, and welcome to tonight's Breathe Pulse. We're looking at mental health in a time of COVID-19. I'm very excited about tonight. I get to facilitate a conversation with my friend and the Executive Director of Breathe, Rachel Sharon. So Rachel is a licensed counselor and yoga instructor. She's actually the owner of Somawise Chicago, counseling practice in Chicago, and is an expert in trauma identification and management. She's also the co-founder of Inner Sense Healing's Art Collective, which is a community wellness center that focuses on fostering self-reflective practices with disempowered populations, an effort to build a restored and engaged community. So our conversation tonight will be a Q&A together. I encourage you all to ask questions as we go. This is about interacting with you all as much as the two of us talking. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rachel, and we'll get started.
Hi, Alice. Thank you. I am really excited to be doing this. I'm really passionate about the topic of mental health, and I believe that mental health, even more than physical health, is the backbone to a really good, fulfilling life. You need both, of course, but without your mental health, the physical health doesn't mean as much, I don't think. In this time that we're in right now with COVID and this global pandemic, like, we're obviously in a time of global crisis in terms of healthcare, but I worry about what's coming next in terms of a global crisis with mental health care. And so I just wanted to do this talk because, mental health is a lot harder to talk about. People are much more likely to say, I have this ache in my foot and go see a doctor, than they are to say, I have an ache in my heart, or I have like an overactive mind and I just don't know what to do with it, and go talk to a therapist or a professional. So I just am passionate about doing everything I can to destigmatize these conversations and to make it okay to ask for help or to say when you're struggling. So thanks for interviewing me on this.
I've lost my speaker. Hold on.
Technical difficulty.
Right. Can you hear me again?
I can.
That's my sound.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're on mute. Your thing says muted.
All right.
There you go. You're back, I think. Do we still have her? She's got that Colorado internet, I see.
Can you hear me now okay? No.
Can you talk, Alice?
How about now? Am I here now?
You are very quiet, but you're here.
Okay. Hi. How about now?
It's still quite quiet, but I think that we can make it work.
Okay, let's give it a go, and I'll see if I can fix this as we go. So, Rachel, let's get kicked off. A big part of what everyone's going through is COVID together, and the lifestyle that we're living is very different. I've certainly noticed one of the big changes that I've had is that I find I sleep a bit more. I'm not sure if that's normal. I still feel the same amount of tiredness. I just want to get your feelings, what's normal now, and what should we be expecting as part of maybe an effect of the COVID environment?
Yeah, for sure. It's absolutely normal to feel more tired right now and to be feeling like you need to sleep more, or not being able to sleep is going to be another thing that people might be experiencing. I've really been trying to think about the situation that we're in through the lens of trauma and what trauma is. And when we talk about trauma, there's two different kinds that we often talk about. There's covert trauma and overt. So overt trauma is an experience that we can name. It's got a distinct day and time and experience with it. So for example, Sunday, May 10th in the afternoon, I fell off my bike. right? We know when we did it, we know what happened, what the experience was. Covert trauma, on the other hand, is an experience of just an underlying sense of not being safe. So a lot of times covert trauma is discussed in terms of like early childhood experiences, experiences with your caregivers, but this is absolutely a very similar experience where we know that there's this very real threat around us, but we can't see it. Right. And we're hearing about it on the news. A lot of us, it's hit close to home, and we know people who've had it, or unfortunately people who've passed from it, but a lot of us might not necessarily. And so it's being like really put in our face that we are in danger. We're so much in danger that we can't leave our house. And if we leave our house, we have to, wash our hands a million times a day and wipe down everything that we touch before and after. And we're just all in this state of hypervigilance, either high grade or low grade hypervigilance. And when our nervous system is in that for this long of a period of time, it's at baseline, it's freaking exhausting. But there's so many other symptoms that can come from that as well, and that can continue to play out over time. So yeah, I mean, I've noticed that like for myself during COVID, I guess I can just give some personal examples of how I've experienced it as well, is, this kind of back and forth emotional roller coaster with this whole thing, where one day I'll be feeling this sense of gratitude and ease and happy that I get to spend more time at home with my husband and my dog and cooking and all of that. And I'll love it and feel grateful for it and hopeful. All the while, there's this underlying sense of what is happening here? How long are we going to be in this? Are we ever going to be back to, air quotes, a normal? How do we prepare for what's next? And, I'm a naturally more introverted person. And so this time at home is great and I'm enjoying it. Absolutely. I feel restored. I feel refreshed, less things on my plate, less pressure. And at the same time, I can tend to hold the weight of the world on my shoulders. And so, what that is doing to my system, to have moments of feeling okay here, and then also moments where I'm like in the deep grief of understanding the suffering that the world is in right now, is a lot to hold. And so all of that sort of nervous system back and forth dysregulation can really wreak a lot of havoc on the body and on the mind. So yeah.
I'm back.
You're back. You've got the back. Britney Spears mic on. Yes.
Britney Spears on a call center. No, thank you, Rach. This is great. We talk about naming symptoms, and you bring a lot of different symptom ideas that we could be facing. And I think a lot of us don't even realize that that is a symptom, and that it's something that we really need to be mindful of, that, oh, that's because of this. And I'm just wondering, why name it? What brings about within us? What comes about within us when we start to name it? What can we do with that?
Yeah. Well, I think before I talk about naming it, I want to talk about maybe what some of the other symptoms could be. Like, we started that with how we might be feeling a lot more tired a lot of the time, or, not able to sleep or needing to oversleep. That's just one part. Another way that this level of nervous system unease and dysregulation can impact your body is, your digestion could be all messed up. Your eating patterns could be quite different. Like, maybe you're eating way more than you ever have, or way less than you ever have. There could be periods where you zone out even so much that you're like losing time, like lose a few minutes up or longer at a time. Kind of, we call it like dissociation. There might be periods where you just can't stay focused, you can't get stuff done. Maybe you're irritable or impatient with your friends or your partners.
And there's almost that resentment to yourself for not getting stuff done. So it kind of compounds it on a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Body aches could be a part of it. So there's all of these things that can be this underlying experience of unease or dis-ease within the body all of a sudden in the last few months. And being able to name that as an experience of COVID and as an experience of the impact of this time. Yeah. And then naming it, your original question, is, okay, so to name something, my favorite cheesy therapist saying is name it to tame it.
Oh, I like it.
When we can name something, it allows us to organize it.
Mm-hmm.
So it puts a frame around it so that it's not just this chaotic experience going on below the surface that feels a little bit all over the place, but words define, words organize. So to give an inner experience a few words and to name it allows us to then work with it. It sort of brings it from the shadow into the light. And when something is in the light and it's got a frame around it, we can say, okay, here's what I'm experiencing. And it's been going on for 3 days. And here's what I'm going to try to do to be with it or to regulate it or to soothe myself at this time.
Does sometimes the naming take a little bit of time to do because maybe it's not linking it, it's the I feel off, or I'm not linking the fact that maybe I do have some digestive issues or maybe I am tired. And so is the actual naming bit maybe takes a bit of time?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it's a language thing too. Sometimes we don't have the language, especially like an emotional range of language. A lot of people's emotional range of language is I'm fine, I'm good, or I'm mad or I'm sad or something, kind of the basics, which are great. But there's a lot more emotional language that we can give things to help ourselves define and organize and understand what's going on. So yeah, naming it absolutely takes practice. And I mean, part of why I'm doing this talk with you is so that people can maybe feel validated if they've had the last couple months of some of those symptoms going on, that they can go, oh, okay, there is some really big stuff at play here that might be causing my mental or physical health to just feel different. It doesn't even have to be horrific or awful, might be, but it could just be different, than what you usually feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get to this soon, but we talked a lot about not shaming ourselves even when we are naming it. You name it to tame it, not to shame it, for sure. And we'll get onto that to sort of self-compassion. But one thing that you and I had talked about before that's a big part of some of these symptoms is actually the inner critic. I wonder if you'd want to talk a bit more about the inner critic and the inner voice.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that something that goes on when, let's say, I'm suddenly really tired all of the time and I feel like I slept 8 hours and yet I still need a nap in the afternoon, but I have so many things that I need to do and I start to shame myself because I'm needing more sleep. Or you maybe are choosing or feeling urges to use more substances than you usually do. Maybe you're drinking a little bit more. Maybe you're using cannabis more or more other drugs, and just really getting down on yourself. So we call that like the inner critic. And the inner critic is the voice that no matter what you're doing, it's telling you that you're doing it wrong. You look wrong, you're saying it wrong, you've made the wrong choice, everyone's mad at you, you're stupid. All of this voice on the inside that when things start to feel off internally and we act or move through our world a little differently, it gives this opportunity for this critical voice to just like light right up and beat the shit out of us from the inside out. So there's the inner critic, but then I was thinking there's the outer critic that I've been seeing a lot in the form of social media. And I wanted to talk about this in this talk because what I have seen since COVID started and since our quarantining time started is this just like massive pushback and really aggression on social media about what people's experiences of this should be. So what I've been seeing is if you are saying that you're enjoying this and you're getting more stuff done and you needed this rest and you needed this time off, then you're wrong. Social media is like, no, this is awful. The world is falling apart. You should not be using this time to get stuff done. And then on the other end, there's, if you're using this time to rest because you're really struggling and you feel really scared and you're lonely and exhausted and not getting stuff done, then there's that other side that's like, you absolutely should be using this time to start your new business. What do you mean you haven't written your business plan for that thing that you wanted to do? Like, I've actually seen these conversations going back and forth on social media. So I also want to just say, with the inner critic and the outer critic, like, it's all okay. Like, no matter what your experience of this is, or, what you're using this time for, or how you feel during this time, it's all okay. Like, none of it is inherently wrong. It's your experience, and you are free to process it as you want to process it. So, just watch those sort of social media threads that are sort of getting down on how you should be experiencing this time, because we've already got our inner critics that we're facing. We've already got that voice inside that's beating us up. And then we look to social media and we've got everyone on there. It's strangers telling us that we're also doing it wrong. So just, watch what you're taking in, and do some work around that inner voice.
And I can imagine that outer critic is a little louder or more frequent because we're spending more time on our computers, whether it's through work or whether it's to connect with our community. We're passing through a social media platform. And I guess there's an element of that outer critic slowly weaves its way into becoming the inner critic. So you take that on board. And I'm wondering if you've got some tools to work with that inner critic. It's happening. I've named it. It just won't be quiet. So is this what you have there?
Yeah. Noticing and naming it is a big one. Naming it as a part of yourself that most of the time our inner critical voice was born at a younger age, from critical caregivers, critical coaches or teachers. And we kind of like take that voice in as our own. And so naming that this is just a part, that this is not the full you. And like, sometimes when I work with clients around the inner critic, I actually have them name it and personify it. So, one of my clients' inner critic is named Susan. And Susan is an older, like a little bit of an older woman. And she even gave her the voice and kind of how she dresses and everything. So what this does is makes it so that she can really dialogue with it. So when she's comes in and she's like, God, I don't know why I laid around so much yesterday. I was just so lazy. I've just been feeling like I'm such a piece of shit for laying around all of the time. I can be like, God, Susan is just really present with you right now, isn't she? And she's like, oh my God, yeah. And so then you can, name it, personify it, and then you can dialogue with it. And I, sometimes like to say, thank you. I understand you're trying to keep me safe, but I don't need this right now. Like, I'm okay, so you can think it. Some people prefer to be a little bit harsher with their inner critic, which is fine. You got to kind of find your own voice, but letting it know that, you don't need that right now and that there's no truth to it. Like, it can settle down.
Yeah. For me, with my inner critic, I like to hold it out kind of in front, almost like a crystal ball, and kind of objectively look at it and go, well, that is interesting, and have that kind of dialogue. And I think for everyone, it's finding that platform. That I love the idea of Susan as well. I think that's just fantastic. So we talked about, tools for the inner critic. Do you want to start talking about some other tools as we go through what you started to name things, you started to identify things that are related to the COVID crisis. What could we start working with? We talked about self-compassion a bit. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah, self-compassion is, I think, the best medicine for the inner critic. And I love self-compassion because it sounds a little woo-woo, it sounds a little hippy-dippy, but there's a lot of research behind self-compassion. There's a lot of evidence behind these practices of self-compassion. And there's a researcher named Kristen Neff who published a book called Self-Compassion, and she's got a lot of her research published in there and a lot of skills and techniques. It's a really lovely book. But one way that she addresses to use self-compassion, which I love, and it's really simple, is to just create 3 statements. The first of which is to name that you're going through something hard. The second is to make it global. So it's not just you. Other people go through this too. And then the third is to offer some kindness or self-soothing. So this would be something like, gosh, I'm going through something really difficult right now. Everyone feels this way sometimes. What can I do that's really kind to myself in this moment? So it's kind of a prescriptive 3 statements, and it can really help to soften that hardness that comes up around criticizing self, is to just name, like, this feels really hard. This is really awful. Everyone goes through this sometimes. Everyone feels this way sometimes. How can I offer myself kindness in this moment?
I love
And then
that
make the choice.
you're doing it with that question, to give yourself that question, because it does bring out, what can I do, rather than laying statements down of it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That question of what can I do for me? What can I do to help me? I really love that.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of other tools, in terms of actual resources to go to. I'm obviously a big advocate of therapy. So talking to somebody. And I think that a lot of people kind of veer around seeing a therapist because it's known to be quite expensive, and it absolutely can be very expensive. But even before COVID started in the last few years, there have been a lot of organizations come out to really help make therapy a lot more accessible for people. And then since COVID, I have been so amazed and really quite moved by how many new organizations have popped up to make therapy totally accessible, if not completely free. And because we're in COVID right now, many states are covering telehealth, so therapy like this. So, which also makes it way easier to get to with scheduling, and you don't have to travel. You don't have to find the therapist in your right part of town and all of that. So that's really great. The couple of organizations that I encourage people to check out for low rate or free therapy would be openpathcollective.org. This is a national website that you can go on, and I think you put in your zip code, and then they send you a list of therapists in your area, in your zip code, that will see clients for $30 to $60 a session. So quite low sliding scale. And then the other one that has popped up, I think since COVID started, is called the Parachute Project. And the Parachute Project is, again, a national organization that is matching therapists who will do pro bono, which is free, therapy with anyone who's working on the front lines, any of the essential workers. And there are a few other organizations that are doing that as well. If you give that one a Google, or maybe they can link through Project Parachute. But yeah, the helpers are here and they want to help. And so reach out and find, because I've been really amazed right when this started, and we didn't know if therapy was going to be covered through telehealth. Like, we were, at first, they would not confirm that for us. And all I heard from all of the therapists I knew were, I'm going to keep seeing my clients anyways, even if I don't get paid. There was no one that was taking a chance on not offering that help during that time. And we were all risking not getting paid for that. And so that the helpers are here and we want to help. So find your way to reach out to someone.
Absolutely. And we'll keep those links up on our social media page this week for people to be able to link to that. I'd also encourage to look at your local state. In the state of Colorado, where I am, they're going to be doing free telehealth for mental health, and that's going to be coming online soon. So we'll keep giving updates as well on mental health, because as Rachel said, your mental health is as critical, if not more critical, than your physical health, especially in a time of something like COVID-19. You made a mention of the frontline workers, and that'd be a nice segue into talking about maybe who is most affected right now, especially in mental health, in their mental health state. Obviously, we all are, though there are some people that are obviously more on the front lines and having a harder impact on themselves and the people around them. And maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah, I think that the people who are most at risk and being most impacted are women and people of color right now. Women and people of color are much more likely to be the folks that are still needing to go to work every day and expose themselves to this threat that we're under. I receive text messages from Planned Parenthood, and sometimes they just send out stats, and I really love it. And the other day they were texting about the risk that women are at right now with this, because the text that they sent said that 75% of hospital workers are women, 66% of grocery store workers are women. And so that's most in both of those industries. And alongside of all of the longstanding issues that women in the workplace have had, wage inequality, sexual harassment issues, we're now in this situation where we have to go to work in a place that is physically unsafe because of the coronavirus. On top of that, women are also much more likely to suffer from the symptoms of trauma and mental health issues. Just our brain processes things in a different way. And that's always been known. Women are more likely to develop PTSD after a trauma than men are. So if you layer all of these things together, I think that one of the most impacted and at-risk groups are women. And that's not even to mention that they're going to those shifts and then many times coming home and moving to their shift as wife and mother, amongst other things. And the pressure just sort of never stops.
It's amazing. The United Nations every year on International Women's Day gives statistics as well for unpaid community care. So whether it's care to people within your family or outside your family that you're not paid for. And so women carry the large bulk of unpaid caregiving skills. So add that on top of the exposure that you're having through your own daily job, adds up. And so as we name those people and as we bring them to the forefront, are there other things that we could talk about that as a family member that you might have a loved one, man or woman, who's in the front line that we can support them further with, probably offering some of these tools that we're sharing here to them, maybe some other ones that we could talk about?
Yeah, definitely, checking in on your people. Checking in on everyone, but especially the people who fall into those more high-risk categories, your friends of color and women, older folks, the ones that are always sort of the high-risk groups, checking in on them and being a listening ear, but also offering a place for them to go and to receive help. There is an organization called Mental Health First Aid, which is a really awesome organization that is working to make mental health first aid just as common as first aid. So, we've all had jobs where we have to do first aid training as a part of it. So they're really working to advocate that we all also know how to do mental health first aid. And they have this acronym called ALGE. I think we have an image of it. And it's how to talk to somebody who might be struggling in a mental health crisis. So the action plan and the acronym that ALGE stands for is assess for risk of suicide or harm. So if you check in with somebody or somebody comes to you and just says, gosh, I'm really struggling with this. Things have been really dark. It's harder for me to get out of bed. I've been drinking more. Always check in about risk of suicide or harm. I know that it's a really hard question to ask. It's a really deep place to go to. But you never know if someone is starting to think about this. I was doing some research about the suicide hotlines and the helplines, which I'll also give information to later, that the mental health hotline, the number that you can call, is up 1,000% since COVID started.
Wow.
So people are calling these hotlines 1,000% more in the last 3 months than before. So if you want to go back to that slide, just always ask. And to come out and to say straightforward is the best way. Don't dance around it. To say, if they're saying things are really dark, to just say, have you thought about hurting yourself or killing yourself? Just ask, and they might be like, no, or they might be like, yeah, you know. So
I've also heard with those types of questions, maybe a follow-up helps, because it may take 1 or 2 times to share openly about an action like that.
Give them a couple opportunities.
Yep.
Yeah. So you always want to assess in the Algae Action Plan from the mental health first aid people. Listen non-judgmentally. So just be there. You don't have to say anything back about, oh God, like, so just get up, you know, but just to be a listener, non-judgmental listener. Give reassurance and information. So that's going to be that, like, it's going to be all right. We're going to get you some help. We're going to get you to the, you know, people and the places that you need to be. Another like compassionate statement of like, a lot of people struggle with this. You're not alone in this. This is not weird or shameful. Encourage appropriate professional help, and encourage self-help and other support strategies. So encourage appropriate professional help would be maybe get them to one of the hotlines, help them find a therapist in their area, something like that. And then encourage self-help is like, what kind of things can you do right now that would feel soothing to you? So I really like coloring, taking a walk, taking a long bath, mindfully cooking a meal, mindfully enjoying a cup of tea, reading, you know, snuggling a pet, some yoga, some whatever, just anything that might help them work with themselves to feel a little bit better. And it's oftentimes not about making them feel totally better, but I say, like, even if it's 5 to 10% better, like, takes that edge off a little bit, cool. So again, Algae is assess, listen, give, encourage appropriate professional help, and encourage self-help.
This is a great action plan, because I think what it does is, for those of you that might have to go through a conversation like this is a tool that you can have ready. Maybe you just have it on your screen of your computer, or write this down, so that as the conversation moves, you've got that ability to come back and find that point. And I think one of the things that we're not very well trained at school is the ability to actually ask how somebody is. We do it in a way to nicely start a conversation. Hi, how are you? But really, we're trying to get to that next topic of discussion, to actually take the time to ask that. It's not something we're used to. What I'm kind of excited about and hopeful is that this actually helps train us to actively and compassionately and with authenticity ask people, how are you? I really do want to know.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
No, that's great. It's great to have those tools. And I think, you know, we've talked about the frontline workers. We've talked about some tools there. We've talked about internal conversations and internal sort of resources for internal soothing. We've talked about some external tools that we can help reach out to, whether individually, or maybe I can help someone I know feel connected. Talking about connection, you know, community is so important. You and I both know this. We work with Breathe. We work with Inner Sense Healing. It feels a little difficult sometimes when you are locked at home to feel connected to community. Let's talk about some ideas for connecting with community.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, these last several years, even prior to COVID, another mental health crisis that had been happening, I think, in this country is a crisis of isolation and loneliness. Some research that I have been following for a while was pointing to that eventually isolation and loneliness would take over as one of the top killers of people. And so the opportunity for that right now is just like hugely increasing. So thank God for the internet because we hear that a lot. Yeah, we can still like absolutely work to stay connected. And I know that when we're feeling really isolated or really down, it can be really hard to make that move to do something like that. But there are so many people doing really beautiful work online right now via Zoom and other platforms. Breathe, the festival that we're both part of, is doing pulses like this every Wednesday night, and then sometimes on Sundays. Sometimes it's, you know, deep conversation. Sometimes it's goofy live music. Sometimes it's a talk about slacklining or extreme sports. So always tune in, because you can ask questions and follow up and see fellow community members. And then through Inner Sense Healing Arts Collective, this is the nonprofit that I helped to co-found, and Alice, you're on the board. We've moved all of our programming online. And so we're about 60% yoga classes, and we range truly all levels. Like we've got chair yoga up to gentle, up to vigorous. And then lots of other ways to connect to. We've got process-oriented groups where you can just come and share what's going on with you. We've got meditations and dance classes and tarot classes. There's a lot of really beautiful things happening through Inner Sense, and we welcome you for anything that you can offer. We're totally a sliding scale, donation-based organization. So even a couple bucks, you know, if you want to send through PayPal and jump into a class, you can check us out. That's our website. And we've got, you know, 3 to 6 classes a day, every day. So there's something for everybody, I think.
I know in Chicago, there's lots of people enjoying Inner Sense, and here in Colorado, Inner Sense is in our house quite frequently during the week. And so we've talked about community groups like Breathe and Inner Sense. I want to remind people that, you know, you have family and friends as well who are all going through this. This is what is extraordinary about this. I'm from New Zealand. My family and friends in New Zealand are going through this. And I think one of the gifts that came out of this for me is being able to connect with my close friends from home who are currently living in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and here I am in the US, and share something in common. And it's very powerful. So remember your friends and family as well. We have a question from Danette. Danette, this is a great question. So Rachel, how do you deal with the big waves of grief? We've kind of talked about the underlying symptoms that we're facing, but some days it's not underlying. It feels like you've been hit by a tsunami. And how do you find grounding on those days where it just feels very uncertain?
That's a really good question. And I think that grief is a really, really common experience that we're in right now. And what like a wild ride grief is, truly. Grief is a word for an experience that encapsulates probably every emotion in the book. And it can hit out of the blue. We can be, you know, I know the times where I've been grieving, I remember one time after my grandma passed away, it was like months later, and I was sitting on a plane thinking I was fine, and some memory popped up, and I just was so deeply emotional during that plane ride. But yeah, it can hit hard, and it can hit fast and unexpected. You have to sit with it. People don't love that answer.
Right. Where's the quick fix? Where's my like, take this, do this, 5 breaths and I'm out.
Right. No, I mean, 5 breaths are good. Do this and take that or whatever. It's all good, but there's nothing that's just going to make it go away. Emotional resilience and emotional tolerance is built from sitting with painful emotional experiences. And so when these waves of grief come, doing all of the nurturing and all of the self-soothing that you know, momentarily, you know, for that whole day, for that whole week, whatever need be, to like love on yourself really hard, and to be careful and to watch out for the inner critic to show up, to watch out for dissociation to happen, which dissociation in this context would be defined like not thinking about it in whatever way, shifting away from it, avoiding it. So rather than going, oh God, I'm feeling a thing, I can't deal with this right now. And sometimes we are in situations, we're in a work meeting or something and we start to feel a thing, you've got to sort of set it to the side, but to promise yourself that you're going to come back and to just sit with and to let it flow. I always tell people emotions are just energy in the body that wants to move out. So think about what the word is: motion, movement. And in Latin, when you put an E in front of something, it's like out. So it's energy in the body, it's motion in the body, and it wants to move out. It does not want to stay stuck in. unprocessed grief is what leads to really deep depression.
And so I think a big part of what you're talking about is putting that time aside. If it can't be now, that's okay. If you're in the middle of something as part of the frontline work, or you're in the middle of a meeting, but putting and promising yourself that time and giving yourself the self-compassion to let whatever needs to move out of you move through. And it could take 30 seconds, it could take 5 minutes, it could take an hour, it could maybe need to be done over a course of days. But
And another thing I like to remind people is, you know, you might feel grief and you might have a lot of feelings, but that really peak pinnacle experience of emotion is an average of, I think it's like 90 seconds. I think it's 90 seconds is the experience of really peak high emotional expression. So a lot of people withhold themselves from ever feeling it because they think it's just going to never stop. I hear that a lot. Well, I can't feel that or else it'll never stop. But it's really a 90-second experience that's like the depth of it. You know, it's rising, which is not intense by any means. You know, it'll rise and then it'll peak for about 1.5 minutes, I think. I could be getting that number a little off. And then from there, you're still feeling things, but it's starting to subside. And yeah, it might ride back up again. But, you know, riding those waves, being with it, and loving on yourself, soothing yourself during it. So something that I observe in a lot of people is that when they are starting to talk about something and kind of offering themselves the space to do it, a lot of people bring their hand to their heart. It's like a really common, natural move for people to do. And so I think that using that in the times where you are starting to sit and feel some grief or feel into some heavy emotion, to simply take like a really loving touch of the heart or maybe over the belly to just signify to yourself, like, I'm here. Like, I'm here. It's okay.
It's fascinating that when you work with, when you're working with dealing with emotions and trauma, there's very similar tools in leadership as well, and they're indicators. And I think one thing that I've learned, and one of the questions we've got here is about managing the emotions, both in a work environment and combining your work environment with the emotions you're working through, is how to show up to be an employee or a leader while holding these emotions. And I think your physical behavior can influence your emotions as much as your emotions can influence your physical behavior. So, you know, I'd love to get your thoughts on one of the things that I've always learned and taught is that if you are feeling small, if you are feeling emotional, you know, bring your shoulders up, feel strong. You don't have to hide the emotions, but I need to be strong. I want to be strong in this moment, and I'm going to give the self-compassion to myself to work through this tonight, later this afternoon. And so as much as your emotions can affect your physical, you can use your physical to help, you know, hold yourself up and say, right now I'll work through this and later I'll do this. But I wonder if you've got any other thoughts about in the work environment.
No, that's perfect. You know, I'm a body-based therapist, and so that's a lot of the skills that I teach. And I'm glad that question was asked because, you know, when you're in a work environment and something hits you or you have a strong emotional feeling, it's truly not always safe to be with that and process that. You know, there are places and time and people where you might just like let it flow. And if you're in a work environment that you're not sure that is welcomed there, and, you know, it's not always welcomed in work environments, sadly, but it's not, you know, there is a bit of, okay, here I am, I'm having this feeling and I need to stay really present for this work project or this meeting that I'm in. How might I feel my feet rooting into the ground? I'm going to press my feet down. Oh, and I notice that as I root down into my feet, my spine can get a little bit taller and I might soften my shoulders. And then the gaze, I always think about the eyes and I observe the eyes in people too. Even just softening your gaze a little bit can help to soften the experience that the rest of your body is having. Simultaneously, if you're on the other end of things, you know, if you're really tight and really squeezing everything and in a stressed out state or getting really angry, sitting back, letting your shoulders soften, letting your gaze soften, and just like bringing yourself down from the body up, you know, rather than from the head down.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that's important for everyone to remember is what you just went through. If that's a moment, maybe it's in a meeting, maybe you're preparing a project or a report that's going to go out very soon, and you've just had a moment where you need to come back and ground yourself. Notice that your other colleagues are going through this as well, and there'll be moments that you'll notice that in them, and use that as a reminder that we are still all in this together, and to know that just as much as you're trying to process your emotions, so are they. So, is back to something Rachel said earlier. We are in this together. Everyone goes through this. And just something to add from my professional experience, if it really wells up and you're in a meeting, maybe a phone call, maybe a video chat, it is okay to excuse yourself. If it's a case where you're going, I think I'm going to need more than the 30 seconds I just took to process this, to come back and actually be present with this meeting, it doesn't matter what the excuse is. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I'm going to have to call you back. I apologize. And there could be a story to it. Or it could be something that you reconvene the conversation tomorrow. I've got a hard stop at 4 or something, and I've got to do other things. And that's okay, because fighting through it, in my experience, it doesn't work. We have a question about spouses and partners and friends, and how we can help them, and what role they play. We talk about friends certainly from a remote environment, but in some cases we're living in apartments with groups of friends who are close quarters, partners and spouses, and even how COVID might be creating, a different type of stress on those close quarter relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We're all together all the time now. There's not like, oh, I'm going to go to work for my 8-hour shift and I'll see you later. It's like, oh no, we're all together for all the shifts all of the time. This is absolutely going to place some stress on people. I think the question was really in relation to if like a mental health, the role during a mental health like crisis, like if things get quite escalated. First of all, follow the ALGE acronym that we put up earlier. And there you go. There's ALGE again. Being a non-judgmental listener is really hard when it's your partner, right? Or if it's like a rift between the two of you. And it's one of the greatest things that you can offer is to just sit back and hear them out. And then to ask the same from them. That takes an immense level of self-awareness and self-regulation. Absolutely. So what you need there is that you are committed all of the time to doing your own self-regulation work, to doing your own work, to staying centered, so that when things do escalate, when things do get intense and stressful, you all have a centering and a ground to stand in within your own being, and to not get swept away into what's going on between the two of you. So to stay in self and to enter into the context of the stress from a state of somewhat regulation is going to be really key. And then, of course, if needed, and I think it's always good to reach out for some professional help, to find individual therapists, to find couples therapists if it's a couple, because we want to be able to be there for our partners, but in all honesty, and our friends, but in all honesty, we can't be those people for everyone. There's nothing that can really, replace a neutral relationship, a therapist, a professional relationship, from the person that you've lived with, the person that has seen you for how many ever years. There's so much stuff that gets built up, and angst and resentments and all of this, that as much as we want to be there, we can do our very, very best. We can be an active and empathetic listener. We can, know all the right things to say at the right times, practice all of that. And, sometimes people do need to get some support elsewhere.
And I think, to reminder to everyone listening, we're going to put up the posts again on our social media, the links for for mental health counseling for options that you can look into. Thank you. There they are again. And it's important, as Rachel said, that this may be for you through what you're going through COVID-19. This may be for you and your partner, your companion, the person that you're in close quarters with right now. And these are really important. I'm sure everyone's having a chuckle because it was my partner who put that question up. So we'll dig there. But it is really important because now you're starting, the differences that you have between two people living close together, and it's acknowledging that there are different needs for each other. He's certainly more of a person that is an introvert and wants time to process and be alone, and I'm very much an extrovert. So it's ensuring that we both get that opportunity and also respect the other person's will right now. We've still got 10 minutes to go. So if people have got questions, things are coming up as we talk through with Rachel on mental health during COVID-19. Please send your messages and send your questions, even your thoughts. And if you have questions after today, we are more than happy to answer those. So you can send them through to our Facebook or our Instagram page. You can use our website, which has a comment section there. And you can also send it to info@discoverbreathe email. So we talked a bit about community before, and we've talked about the frontline workers and the healthcare sector. We forget about those that are actually kind of on the front line because they've got other family members working there, and you've kind of touched on it already. But when you're helping older people, mom, dad, aunties, could be people in your greater family. Any suggestions on how to approach the mental health questions there? I know having those questions with my parents would be, how are you feeling? I'm great. And there's the end of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that might be, you might not feel comfortable digging into those kind of relationships, digging in with the questions in those kind of relationships. And you'd be surprised that even just calling and checking in, how are you? And then engaging them in conversation around other things, how you can really start to get a sense, you can feel into people, whether they seem a little down, their tone of voice is down, or their speech is slower, or if they're very irritable and anxious. I think that they don't have to be necessarily saying it for you to know it. And then we can't help everyone. That is something to remember as well. We can be there and we can listen, but we can't be the people that jumps in and makes sure, and I am very guilty of this, wants to make sure that everybody is okay all of the time and making sure that everybody has the resources that they need all of the time, because some people aren't ready for it and they're not going to take that direction. But just listening, and engaging in normal conversation is sometimes can be good and can be enough. I have a friend who calls me and she'll say I don't need anything from this, but I just need to say all of this. I just need to get it out and vent. And I'm like, go. And it just she gets it all out. And I just sit and go, God, yeah, that's rough. That sucks. That's so hard. And she's like, oh, this feels so much better. People just need to be heard and affirmed. So you don't always have to say the exact right thing, but just listen and affirm. That's huge for people.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you made a point there that I think is worth repeating, which is you can't help everyone right now. And this is where we keep offering this external support. And you might be the catalyst to help that person find that help. But we want you to also acknowledge the self-compassion within you, that it's okay if you can't help everyone, but there is places for people to have help.
And I also just added into the Facebook chat on this video, this healthline.com, which is a link that was up on our links, but it's actually, it's kind of like a certain page within that website. My friend Isabel posted this and I dug into it a little bit. Choose Your Own Adventure Mental Health Guide. It's so comprehensive. So you can scroll down and click having a hard time getting out of bed. And then that will take you to another page with some ideas of what to do. And then some links of other websites you can read about. There's links on there that'll take you to the top 5 calm or well-being apps or top 5 apps to use if you're suffering from anxiety. And so check out that, like really dig through that link that I just put on there, because there's a lot of resources on that. And so, again, thank God for the internet again, because we have a lot of this at our fingertips, and so even encouraging someone like, hey, I got this new app and it just has like these really calming stories that it tells. And I've really been enjoying it in the evening when I'm feeling stressed. You might try that, and just like little crumbs here and there of kind of what you're doing that's helping.
Yeah, the whole build your own story and solution is so important, because as you said, it's not one size fits all for solutions. So Paula has a great question here, and it's some suggestions for managers and those in leadership positions as we all start going back to work, as we possibly start going back to the office. How can managers and leaders support their team and their mental health while trying to come back to continue to work on their projects and their processes at their job?
I'm going to let you take that one.
I thought
you're the leadership expert.
Cool. Well, we'll try and riff. So some thoughts for me is, I think, remember that we're all human. And we're all going through this together. And certainly for those that are in leadership and management positions, we also are still going through the challenges. So assume that anything you might be going through, your employees are going through, and possibly more. They might have children that aren't going to school. They might have elderly parents or relatives staying with them. Their spouse or someone in the family may have lost their job. And so I think, there's a couple of things that are going on right now in terms of returning to work with support. Assess where the work quality and the work productivity is highest, and work with your team. If they're saying, I might actually be better from home, and you have the luxury to do that for the next couple of weeks, honor that, right? Honor the acknowledgement that I am most productive when. And likewise, if there is a requirement for teams to get together, really think about that social interaction and how teams might feel comfortable. Is it much larger spaces? Is it face masks? Is there ways that we can work? But I think most importantly is checking in and honor anyone that has high risk, whether they're at high risk, whether family members are high risk, because remember that your health and safety is your number one priority. Your health and well-being in a hierarchy of your needs is much higher than your need to perform high quality work. And if you as a manager and a leader are not showing your respect to that, there's no way that you can force work improvements in somebody who is already struggling with their basic needs. Any thoughts, Rach?
No, I think that's great. You covered it. It's going to require a lot of compassion and understanding, which for some leaders is going to come really naturally, and for others it's never come that naturally. So it's going to require management teams to be really patient and to be really compassionate and understand the basic needs hierarchy that you mentioned.
I think it's actually an opportunity if you are a leader, a manager, as well as a team member. Sometimes you may actually have a manager that's not able to step into the management or leadership role right now because they are going through such a serious situation at home or through this crisis. Could be an opportunity for you to step up. So there's opportunities here, and the opportunity could be to lead from a place of compassion, from authenticity, and from a place of emotional relationship development. So it could be, I need to get to know my team a little better, enough that I don't feel like I'm prying beyond something they want to share, but to be able to gain that information to know, I get it, grandma's staying with you. I completely understand. Why don't you and I do video conferences at least for the next 2 weeks? Or I understand you're coming a long distance and you commute on the train. How about I talk to the manager to see if we can work something else out now? So this is an opportunity where relationships are going to come back into the workplace, which is something that we've maybe left behind for a while. So a good opportunity here.
Yeah, lovely.
Well, we are getting close. I think we might want to wrap this up. This has been fantastic, Rach. A couple of takeaways I think I had, and I'm sure everyone has their different takeaways, and we're after today, please keep posting it up on Facebook if things really resonated with you, or if there are things that we didn't cover and you want us to come back in a week or 2 weeks to cover. But I think, one thing is naming what's going on. Oh, I'm sleeping more. Oh, I'm not eating well. Oh, I'm feeling irritated, usually in the afternoons, about this. That naming it, as you're saying, naming it to tame it's really important. That self-compassion, we're all going through it. It's okay. And in particular, listening to that inner critic. Is it happening? Am I having a bit of an inner critic? Do I need to give it a name? Do I need to have some dialogue with it and finding a way to do it? And then working through some external sources. We've provided some opportunity to see some healthcare professionals sites that we can go to, and we'll keep posting those up. And ultimately connect back with your community. Your community isn't disappeared, they're just on a screen. So checking out Breathe's Pulses, checking out in a sense classes during the week, and know that there are people like you out there and they're ready to connect with you.
Yeah. And, and when we're looking at community support, using the ALGE acronym that we put up earlier. And then there's a couple other numbers that I wanted you to have, which is the helplines. So there's the substance abuse and mental health support hotline, which is this one. And then there's the suicide hotline. And you can use either one of those at any time. There's also 741-741 is a texting mental health support. So if you text 741-741, someone 24 hours a day will get back to you just to chat if you're needing some mental health support. And then in Illinois, where I am, I think that Governor Pritzker is doing a really great job with what he's doing with this time. So shout out Governor Pritzker. But they have created a texting platform that is 552-020. So that's 552-020. And it's similar to the other texting line. You can text the word talk or hablar in Spanish and get in either Spanish speaker or an English speaker to help with some emotional support if you're struggling.
Thank you. I think those last ones were really important. And again, we'll put those up for everyone. You can go back onto YouTube and watch this video again to get those links and those calling numbers. But I want to thank you, Rach. This has been a talk. I hope that everyone watching got something out of this. I certainly did. As Rach pointed out right at the beginning, your mental health is as important, if not more important, than your physical health right now. Taking care of you means that we're taking care of each other. So thank you, Rachel. We've had another great talk tonight. Pulse will happen again on Wednesday. We've got talking about living in vans and so join us on Wednesday night. Follow us on our social media. So Discover Breathe, we're at Facebook and on Instagram. You can check out our webpage. We have fantastic topics and information on our webpage. And if you just want to get hold of us, you can also email us at info@discoverbreathe. So thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Alice. This was lovely.
Have a great night, everyone. And remember to just breathe.
See you.